Hi, this is Scott Amyx, and I'm joined by Rob Carpenter, CEO of Valyant AI. Rob, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, in the very, very rare occasions that I do go to fast food, um, which I rarely do, the problem that I have is, when I go through the drive-through, it's a hassle making orders. They can't hear me, I can't hear them, and it takes a couple iterations before they somewhat get it right, and then I proceed on to the payment window. Uh, why did you feel that the restaurant was an ideal target market for Valiant AI?
Yeah, we really like the quick serve restaurant market. It's huge. Within the United States, it's $865 billion per year. And historically, it's an industry that struggled from a profit margin perspective, and it's extremely competitive. And so I think from our point of view, if we can come in and we can help move the needle and make each restaurant location a little more successful, when you aggregate that over a course of an industry, you're talking about billions or tens of billions of dollars in annual savings. So I think it's a market that's ripe, and then the technology is extremely difficult. So from a barriers to entry perspective, it gives you some wiggle room, I think, to build a good product without a massive amount of competition that drives commoditization.
Yeah, I agree with you that the food service area is really ripe for automation, both from an AI perspective, but also the robotic side. So everything from taking order, the payment, delivery of the food and the plates, and even I'm seeing robotics that's actually doing the dishes, and of course there's robotic arms that's cooking hamburgers.
Yeah.
So it is really ripe for that displacement from a disruption. Let's talk a little bit about your technology. Google, of course, they have their duplex AI that tries to mimic human conversation.
Yeah.
It actually even inserts pauses and fillers such as ahs and ums, so it seems more natural. How does your system work, and was it built from the ground up versus using, let's say, open source and other API services that others use?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'd say there's generally kind of three buckets, right? There's completely from scratch. Then there's a second bucket, which is open source, which maybe gives you a starting point, and then you have to build a bunch of the framework. And then there's off the shelf, and you really just kind of focus on customizing that and integrating that within your system. I would say that we're probably about 75% completely custom from scratch, and then about 25% open source. The last thing that we had that was part of our platform and ecosystem that was off the shelf was text to speech, and that's the actual voice. And that actually is the Google Duplex voice that you're referencing. And that's kind of one component of the overall infrastructure to deliver conversational AI. And we really, from our perspective, didn't think that was very critical, and we were focused on all the other elements. And I can just tell you that from our experience, we've actually learned that that text to speech voice is massively, massively important. So just within the last few months, we really got the product to a point where it was ready to start scaling out. And interestingly, we actually started running into customer psychology issues where people were like, oh no, here's another computer. I don't like AI. I don't like automation. It's taking jobs. And we actually started running into some pushback. And what we found when we transitioned off the shelf kind of robotic voice to a human voice, that those complaints essentially completely evaporated. And I think by humanizing it, people became far more comfortable carrying on that conversation with it. So that's been a massive, massive amount of learning for us.
Well, at least now you can blame the robots for getting the order mixed up.
Right.
Now, one of the core things from an IP that you guys talk about is this critical nature of the logic engine component.
Oh, man,
Tell us
huge.
about that logic and how it accurately categorizes that command.
Yeah, happy to. And just to kind of give the viewers just a little bit of background on how conversational AI works, I would argue that there's four key components. So in whatever environment a customer is communicating with a conversational AI, you're going to have an audio input into your speech to text software where you're going to transcribe it. Then we run it through a second component, which is a natural language processor. I know there are some companies out there that are dabbling by merging those two together, but I think roughly under the covers, you still have a two-step process. So whereas speech to text transcribes it, then natural language processor comes in and parses the information into something that the computer can use to take action on. So I might say something like, I'll get a burger. the NLP will then read that text and it will output add one burger to order, right? Because just a difference between a singular and a plural word could mean one burger or two burgers. And so the NLP is what reads that and then tells the logic engine what to do. The logic engine is the third step. And then the fourth step is text to speech, as we talked about. When I kind of came into this industry in this field, I really felt like speech to text and NLP were the critical things, because that's all you hear about. That's the articles, that's everything. And what we've learned is that the logic engine is absolutely as important as NLP and speech to text is. And in a lot of situations, for a true enterprise client, it's more important than those other outlets are. And it's vastly been the most amount of effort and time on our part of building that out, because you essentially have to build out a rudimentary level of human logic to be able to handle true fluid conversations with customers. You'll hear a lot of basic examples from AI companies saying something like, I want a cheeseburger and a drink. And that's really simple. And in fact, really any third-party AI software off the shelf can do that. The problem is that's not actually how customers order. They'll say something like, hey, I want the number one and a Pepsi. They'll actually make that a Dr. Pepper. And then the software will come back and say, okay, I've added the number one and the Dr. Pepper. And they'll say, okay, and I want some fries. Oh, and no lettuce on that. So fries was the last target, and then they said no lettuce. But as humans, we have common sense, and we know lettuce doesn't go on fries. Computers, at the end of the day, are just silicon, which is just sand, really well packed together, right? Computer doesn't know that lettuce doesn't go on fries. So you have to build out a common sense engine that can underlie this whole platform. That I gave one silly example, but there's 1,000 permutations of that, of things that we innately and easily understand that computers don't. And you have to have all of that built in there for the computer to intelligently respond back and say, okay, I've updated your number one combo with lettuce. You told me that you wanted the Dr. Pepper, but now I need to also ask you about the side. And so this logic engine also has to maintain a level of short-term memory where it knows what you have added, what you haven't added, and what's still missing that it needs to get from you. And you really can't be in a situation where, the last 20 years of kind of basic, conversational AI and call centers, they're just decision trees, or you follow a little bit of a basic path. When you roll these things out to an enterprise environment and you're having dynamic, fluid conversations, you have to be able to actually lead the conversation as the AI. And you need the logic engine to drive that conversation and tell the text-to-speech engine what to actually say back to the customer so that you can complete the order. And so it's everything from understanding what's missing, building the right order. It could be upselling. Customer could request something you don't sell anymore and you need to offer another product. They could request something that's in another restaurant, like a Coca-Cola, but this restaurant only serves Pepsi. You need to know that. Is it the right time of day? There's massive amounts of information that's gone into that. And we've spent years building out this logic engine so that it can carry on a more fluid conversation and lead that discussion with the customer.
So, by the way, lettuce and fries are very good.
Okay, well, you learn something new every day.
So, I think the way I'm thinking about it is kind of like a mathematical function equation, right? So you have certain variables, such as, let's say, main meal, which is sort of a sandwich. Then you have size like fries and drinks and so forth. And you got the coefficients that determines the quantity and the specific attributes. But underneath it, what you're talking about is this notion of relationships, right? So it's maintaining the function, what's missing, but the taxonomy and the ontology that understands the relationship so that it knows that, lettuce doesn't go on fries, as an example that you mentioned before. So this notion of logic, is this all human fed and determined, or are you also applying ML that it can actually start to understand and kind of develop its own set of logic over time as well?
Yeah, that will come. We're not doing much from an ML perspective inside the logic engine. Now, obviously, speech to text, NLP, and text to speech has a lot of ML built into it. The areas within the logic engine where we do use ML right now is more around product recommendations. So it's going to say, hey, based on the time of day and maybe things like the weather and some customer profile information and previous items that they've ordered, I'm going to recommend, X product to the Y and Z that you've already added. And so we do use ML there, and then that learns and gets better and better over time. Now, further down the road, I think we'll definitely start to see ML be added to the logic engine in a lot of different places. But at the end of the day, AI is really a prediction tool, and it's going to predict with some level of accuracy, could be 50%, could be 99%, that the specified action is the next one that has to be taken. But there's so much that you have to get right around the logic engine. We're not quite ready yet to turn that over to a prediction-based system. I do anticipate that will come down the road, though.
So the question that I have in terms of the logic system um, is that how configurable is it? So it's one thing to, let's say, tune it or customize it for, let's say, McDonald's, but
Yeah,
it's completely different to go to Subway, that where the ingredients and the varieties of ingredients that goes into it is very different. And then, of course, fast food is one thing, but if you go to more of a restaurant, again, it changes quite a bit. So,
definitely.
so the general chassis is same, but then, do you make it so that it's easy to manipulate, add, and edit those business objects?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So we have a brand management platform that you can log into, and then everything within the conversational AI engine, including all the relationships, are then logic data driven and can be modified and updated in that brand portal. So there is definitely that capability. I would say overall, going from one brand to another, it's probably a 10 to 15% customization just to get everything really refined and tuned to make sure that it's working correctly. We just rolled out a prototype for a new brand, and it took us about 2 weeks. So it doesn't take massive amounts of time to roll out new companies, but there is still some work that has to go into it. Now, I think the move from restaurants to, say, hospitality or to retail, that underlying technology, the vast majority of it could carry over, but you might be looking at 40% that has to be customized. But then when you go from your first, retail customer to your second, then hopefully you're back to that kind of 10% customization. And as you reach within a specific vertical, 5 customers, 10 customers, 15, then most of the different permutations get pretty much built out at that point. And I think at that point, and at least my hope is, then you have really no customizations at that point because all the infrastructure is there to handle it. And I
Yeah.
think as a last comment on this, it does get back to a bigger picture kind of AGI versus ANI, a general intelligence versus a narrow intelligence. And as you look at some of the authors and the luminaries in the space, like Kai-Fu Lee, he talks pretty extensively about why ANI is so critical right now. And I actually agree with that it definitely takes, and I think the logic engine is a key example, a lot of really focused and directed infrastructure
Hmm.
to deliver one solution and do it really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think that the logic engine is where we see that as being that critical component.
Agreed. So we only have 1 minute left. I have two questions. One is, why not just focus on the logic engine and be the tech uh, expert that feeds into other NLP systems? So that's my one question. The second question is, what was your greatest product innovation failure, and what was the lesson learned?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of AI companies that are going to a more platform play or a more plug and play perspective. I think at the end of the day, somebody just has to do the hard work to actually deliver real product to end customers. And so Valyant's really coming from the perspective of being an end-to-end provider. And we want to deliver true solutions, not just a component and then leave it up to other companies to be the integrators that build a great product that solves a problem in the market. And then I think that just overall is a personal perspective. And then greatest failure from a technology perspective, I mean, there's been thousands of things that didn't work that we had to figure out new iterations of. Where we started this company was actually trying to build digital employees to go inside the restaurants themselves. And we ran into numerous challenges with that product. And that's why we made the pivot to a drive-through AI system.
Mm, terrific. Great. Very practical. So today I've been joined by Rob Carpenter, CEO and founder of Valyant AI. Rob, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.